Hey everyone, let's talk about a word we use all the time, a word we think we know inside and out, forever. But what if I told you that in the original Hebrew of the Old Testament, the word for forever doesn't always mean, well, forever. It's actually way more complex and honestly way more fascinating. So let's dive in.
Just think about it for a second. When you're reading about an everlasting covenant or a perpetual statute in the Bible, what picture comes to mind? For most of us, it's a straight line of time just stretching on and on into infinity. But is that really what the original authors were trying to say? This is the big question we're going to unpack today.
To really get our heads around this, let's start with a super simple example from English. If I talk about a great whale, you know I mean it's large, it's huge. But if I say, that's a great idea, I mean it's excellent, it's brilliant. It's the exact same word, right? But the meaning totally changes based on the context. This is the exact principle we need to bring with us when we look at these ancient words. Okay, so let's meet the star of the show, Olam. This is the Hebrew word that so often gets translated into English as eternal or forever, but just look at its actual dictionary definition. Yeah, it can mean eternity, but it can also mean just a long period of time, or antiquity in the distant past, or even the distant future. That is a whole spectrum of meaning, all packed into one little word. So let's start with what is probably the most surprising meaning. We think of forever as something that always points forward. But Olam can actually be a time traveler and point backwards, deep into the distant past. For example, take this verse from Genesis 6. It's talking about the heroes before the Great Flood. It says, they were the mighty men who were of old. That little phrase, of old, you know what that is in the original Hebrew? That's Olam. It's clearly pointing backward to a time that happened long, long ago. And we see it again right here in Deuteronomy. Remember the days of old. Once again, that's Olam. The verse isn't about the future at all. It's a command to look back, to think about the ancient past. And just one more to really drive it home. This one's from Joshua. Long ago, speaking of when Abraham's ancestors lived, the Hebrew word, you guessed it, Olam. So our first huge takeaway is that Olam isn't just about the future. It can be all about the deep, ancient past. All right, so Olam can look backward, but what about when it does look forward? Well, this is where we get to its second really surprising meaning, a long but ultimately finite period of time, an eternity that actually has an ending. Now, I know that sounds like a total contradiction, doesn't it? How can forever have an end? Well, it all depends on the context of what or who is being described. Let's just look at the evidence. Let's look at this law in Exodus about a servant who chooses to stay with his master. The original text says he shall serve his master Olam. Now, most translations correctly render this as for life, because it was understood by everyone that this service would end when the person died. So here, Olam means for the duration of his life. A long time, absolutely, but a very finite period. We see the same exact principle at play in Leviticus, talking about foreign slaves. It says the Israelites could take them as Olam slaves. Again, this doesn't mean for trillions of years into the future. It means for the duration of that person's lifetime. The forever is bound and defined by the lifespan of the subject. Okay, so if Olam can mean the past or a future with a clear end date, what about the meaning that we're almost most familiar with? This brings us to how Olam is used when it's connected to God and his promises, which is really where we get our classic idea of everlasting. Here in Genesis, right after the flood, God establishes an Olam covenant, and he gives the rainbow as a sign. This promise is intended to last for as long as the earth itself exists. It's a defining, enduring, foundational promise. And we see it again right here with the foundational promise God makes to Abraham. He establishes an Olam covenant to be their God. The context here is the key. Because God himself is eternal, his commitment takes on that quality of timelessness, of permanence. So this is the crucial point. Right here, when Olam is attached to God, it's not just about counting an infinite number of years. It's describing the quality of the thing. The promise is Olam because it comes from an eternal God, and because of that, it is certain, it's unbreakable, and it defines the relationship for its entire existence. So what do we do with all this? Olam can mean the ancient past, it can mean a long but finite lifetime, or it can mean an enduring, age-defining promise. Let's pull all these threads together now and look at the bigger picture. We started this whole thing by challenging that simple idea of forever.
Then we uncovered these multiple faces of Olam, how it can look backward to the past and how it can describe these long but limited periods. And that led us to realize that its deepest meaning is often much more about the significance of a period than just its length.
So the bottom line is, Olam isn't just a stopwatch, it's a word that describes a whole span of time, an age or an era, and it highlights its defining quality, its scope, often as determined by God's plan. It's really about the weight and importance of that period of time. You know, understanding this makes some really profound verses, like this one from Ecclesiastes, just pop in a whole new way. When it says God has set Olam in the human heart, maybe it means more than just a desire for endless life. Maybe it's pointing to this deep-seated longing we all have to understand the scope of God's ages, to see the bigger picture, and to find our place in the grand, significant story that He is writing. So, we're left with this really cool question to think about. If Olam isn't just about infinite time, but about the quality, the significance, and the God-defined scope of an age, what happens when we reread the Bible with that lens? What new layers of meaning might we suddenly uncover in passages we thought we knew by heart? It's a fascinating thought to take with you. Thanks so much for watching.